All right, this week we pick up with Shemot, also known as Exodus, chapter 26, verse 8. Literally in English, it says, length, the curtain, the one, 30 in measure, and width, 4 in measure, the curtain, the one, measure 1 to 11 curtains. In Hebrew, they really kind of say 11. All right, so it starts off with Orech, Orech, Orech. Those of you who have seen a certain movie know what I'm talking about. It means length, and that's really all it means. And this is Haya Ria, the curtain, so the length of the curtain. The curtain is a veil, a curtain, so called from tremulous motion. Think about curtains hanging in the wind blowing them and they're trembling. So the name for curtain came from what it does when it blows in the wind. All right, so then the next word is ha-ahat, which is, of course, the plural of echad. So how is one plural? I don't know. Probably because it's going to be each instead of one. But you get it. It's one. It's the same. It's used for the idea of first as opposed to second. This is number one, not number two. Yeah, just saying. They use it for the first month, for the first day. So the word first in English is often translated for this word because of that. So even though it's the first, because it's the first day of the month, you have many first days of the month. Every time you have a new month, you have a new first day. So it's plural, even though it's singular. Then it says sheloshim. That's the word for 30. So what was our word before it? So the measure of, and it'll be each because it's idiomatic, if you will. So the measure of each of these curtains will be sheloshim, 30. Ba'ama, that's always used metaphorically of the beginning, the head, the foundation, the thing. It's also the name of a measure, the name that in the West we know more precisely as cubit. So it's saying that it will be 30 cubits in measure. What is a cubit? Well, a cubit, as far as anybody knows, is a length of a man's hand from the tip of his middle finger over here to the very edge of his elbow. Now, I've always been told that's approximately 18 inches. And I thought, well, I'm much taller than men were 5,000 years ago. A whole head taller. So I decided, let's measure. So we measured my arm from here to here, and that's 19 inches. And then I thought, well, men were more the size of my wife back then. And yes, that was the average size of a man was, what are you, 4'2"? Anyway, she's 5'4", and men were actually, in the 2,000 years ago, the average Hebrew was 5'9", I think, or maybe 7, I don't remember which, and then 5,000 years, so I think it was 5'9", 2,000 years ago, and then further back, 5'7"-ish, something like that. So they were still taller than my wife is. But I measured her arm, and do you remember what it was? It was like 2 inches different, right? So I went 19 inches. So yours was 17. So 18 inches sounds very reasonable to me, because the man would have been a little bit taller, shorter than me, but taller than my wife. And if you averaged out the size, I think about 18 inches is probably right on. It's going to be as close as any of us can get until something's found that says, yeah, it was exactly 18 inches, which you're not going to find because you didn't have inches and measurements back then. I'm just saying. So it's 30 cubits, which, if you think about that, 18 times 30, that's pretty long. Then it says ve rochav, so that's, and its width, how wide it's going to be, arba, that's 4. So it's going to be 4 ba'ama. Remember, that's the measurement, and we know it as a cubit. So it's going to be 4 cubits wide. Not terribly wide. Put 2 of these and 2 of these together, and it's a pretty good sized curtain. Anyway, especially with that kind of length on it. That's a pretty long curtain. And this is ha-i-ria. We've had that, the curtain. We've had that already. Ha-echat, that's the one in plural. Feminine plural, by the way. Then it's midah, there's your measure. This is, I don't know if we've had this particular word. We may have. It's the length, it's the measure of something. So it's really the word for measure. So the measure achat, remember this can be one, it can be first, it can be each, which it will be in this case, or other. Did you say the one or the other? That's where we're going with this, by the way. It says le'ashite. Did I miss a word? No, that's the one. Which is, you can either say 2:11 or 4:11. Either T-O, then the word 11, or F-O-R, then the word 11. Because it's basically two words. They put the lamed in front, and it's generally thought of as two. So, Mismo Le David, a song to David, but it could also be Mismo Le David, a song for David, which is the way it's thought of. Or by, even they use the word by David. All of those are just different ways that we have to make it, use it in English for it to make sense to us. But anyway, so it's 11, then it's eshrei, which is your word for 10. It's the word for 10. So instead of saying echad eshrei, they say ashtei eshrei. And it's two words, but it just means, and literally it's 2:11. But it's just, it's going to be 11. And it's yeriot. There's your word for curtains again. It's in plural this time. So the translation then becomes the length of each, because it said the one. So the length of each curtain will be 30 cubits. And the width of each, it said the one, and they mean each. The width of each curtain, 4 cubits. And it's the same measure, because it says echad again, the one. The same measure, it says to the 11 curtains. So it's the same measure for all 11 curtains, is what they mean by to the 11 curtains. Or more literally, to the 11 curtains. Y'all follow me so far. The length of each curtain will be 30 cubits, and the width of each curtain, 4 cubits. The same measure for all 11 curtains. So all 11 of these curtains are going to be 30 cubits long and 4 cubits wide. Now, remember, this is the second set of curtains. You had 2 sets of curtains. The first set was only 28 cubits long, if we recall, but it was 4 cubits wide. So this is going to be 2 cubits longer than the previous. So if you're putting one over the top of the other, you might have some understanding there, right? The top one's going to have to be longer. Rashi said the space was to cover the boards. Pseudo said 2 cubits more than the length of the curtains of the tabernacle. The explanation of this difference will also be found further on. Well, let's talk about this. All right. I made a little visual for you guys to look at. Let's talk about the curtains. What I have here is the ugliest tabernacle you've ever seen in your life. This is to scale, by the way. So you can tell that it's, of course, the real one's probably much straighter than this. But anyway, you can tell it's very long and actually quite thin, not very wide. But this is, as I said, to scale. Now, you have the first curtain. By the way, there is no place in the Torah where it tells us where this is to be placed. We don't know. I'm having to look over at my monitor a lot to make sure you're able to see what I'm trying to show you. We don't know if the curtain hangs way over at this end, and a little bit at the other end, or if it starts at this end and hangs all the way over at the other end, or if it goes sideways. It doesn't say. We don't know. We have to guess, right? But there's some good guesses we can make. If we stop and think about why would you have two sets of curtains, one on top of the other, and then why would you have something over the top of those? Okay, so we know that this first set of curtains, even though he says it'll all be explained later, I'm going to explain it now. We know that this first set of curtains, this little white piece of paper that represents it, by the way, this is to scale. This white piece of paper represents, except how the little lines I put in it, that's because I sewed them together. Anyway, so it represents all of the long, skinny ones, right? We know that this would have been made of the four colors, I forget what they are, blue, purple, scarlet, crimson. Those are the four colors. It would have been all blended in. And then on at least one side, it could have been on two, but on at least one side, you were supposed to put the cherubim. Cherubim, if you don't know what that means. But remember, in Isaiah, the description is such that it had four faces. You could say it had two sets of wings. It's possible. I kind of think it did. But I don't recall that being part of any of this passage, though it was probably something I picked up on in Isaiah. I don't remember now. But y'all remember me talking about that, I hope. So you had the body basically of a man, but remember it had the legs, the feet of the ox, if you recall. Or was it a goat? I think it was an ox. Yeah, it was an ox. So it had the hooves of the ox, its legs were oxen. They had the body somewhat like a man, and then it had two sets of wings and four faces on its head. All I ever saw when I looked up all of these images on the internet were your typical Christian angels. A single face of a man, usually long hair, the hands held together. God only knows why, other than Christian. Certainly not accurate, because this is not how Jews did things. Jews prayed like this, with their head up. This is why when Constantine ordered them to do everything opposite of Christianity, opposite of Judaism, I would do that every time, don't I? Okay, so this is Judaism, this is Christianity. You see what I'm saying? So everything that you're seeing on the top of these arcs is utterly wrong. They did not have one face, they had four. They did not have, probably had two sets of wings. One set is fine, because we can't be terribly sure of that. None of us were there, we didn't see it. Nothing's left for us to look at. So at this point, it can be one or the other. We do know that the wings were very high, so they were obviously a very large set of wings. And then the legs would not have had feet on the back of. I noticed that every one of the arcs had the regular feet on the back, looked like shoes. So you follow. I said all that to say, now remember, going back to this had images like that all over it. Now, you have this building, and the way most people see it, and we'll get into this much more when we get into the building of the boards of the building. Almost everywhere you look, the boards are all together. I found one image where they separated the boards out. Now this one makes sense, people. I think that what they did was go over the top. I think that it started at the very beginning, and this hung down over the sides, on both sides, and then this would have hung down. It wouldn't have stuck out. It would have hung down. And I think that the thing is, I think that this is wider and longer. And when we get into the building of the boards and the setting up of the pedestals for the boards and all of that, the thing is, if you're going to put these boards together, why are you not putting dowels in these boards to shove these boards together? Plus, here's the issue. If you make this thing all completely solid, if you're out in a desert during 130-degree weather, when your high priest goes into the Holy of Holies, he's not coming back out, going to find him dead on the floor. And not because he sinned, but because it's too hot. So what you have are, I think, the boards are going to be separate. They all had their individual pedestals to sit on, which is what you would do with a column. And so we need to think of it in terms of a column rather than a solid board like this. So this, if you have ways for air to blow through, is going to come, I think, all the way back to here. And when you spread these out, I think that you're going to wind up with a lot less overhang. Follow what I'm saying? So, what is this then? It's a bug screen. It's going to keep the bugs out. It's going to allow the air to flow through the building in the heat. Now, when you start thinking of it in those terms, and you get to the second one, made out of goat skin, that's pretty much going to be white, like this. Again, this is scale. Now look at the difference in the size. I'm going to put the bigger one in the back. Maybe I should move it this way. Got the bottom lined up. You can see that not a lot longer, is it? When you do the width, let me do it this way. See the width here? It's barely bigger. And this, again, both of these things are to scale. Well, is that the right way to say it? They're like 1/100th of scale or something like that. I don't know exactly what it is. But the real one's much bigger is what I'm saying. But they are, if you shrink it down, the scale is correct. So what I'm saying is it's not much bigger. Very, very, very little left over. But, so if you put the first one on top, and you start at the beginning, it says to take the second one and put it over the top and let one half fold over the front, which is, as you can see, not very much hanging over. It's hopefully you can see. Let me get my fingers out of the way. I don't know how to hold it on there. Here we go. See, this is very little. Look how much building you have left when you pull this down. So there's very little over it, but it goes over the top, goes all the way to the back, and then it folds down. And what's that going to do? Okay, let's say you're in wintertime, and you need to keep warm. You drop it down, and it covers and stops the wind. You follow? That's going to keep you warm in the winter. This is going to keep the bugs out and be pretty and be what's seen. All of these cherubim, all of the cherubim on the top. I believe that because these will be separated instead of put together, you'll see them on the inside as well. In fact, let's go ahead and look at some images, and I'll talk over those as I go. And by the way, the next couple of things that go over the top, the Bible never tells us how long or wide those are to be. That's going to become important here in a minute. So let's go ahead and switch over. Is it on? Oh, darn it. Okay, here we go. Okay. So if the tabernacle was literally square and everything just held down, just went straight down like what you see in this image, you would have a problem, because if it rained, the ceiling's coming down. So this is, anyone who builds tents, and those of us who are Jewish that do this every year, know better. I've been designing and redesigning tents ever since we started on this journey years ago, and as you know, I've designed and built a really big tent, right? And one of the issues that we've always had is water. Water sitting on the top. There's nothing there to keep the water off the top, is there? And there is no mention in the scriptures of what to do up there. There is talk about stakes going into the ground, and I think that's going to be well explained soon enough. Okay, here we go. Now here's the more common one that you see. The one that you see on the outside edge there. By the way, this is a real one. This is a full, all the way to scale, real life size tabernacle, actually in Israel. So what they did was they took the stakes and they took that top part and they pull it out tight and then put the stakes down into the ground. This is a possibility. It may even be probable, but it is at least a possibility. If you pull that out tight, then when the water comes down, which is going to happen, they didn't go through the desert for 40 years without water coming out of the sky, right? Boy, you talk about one heck of a drought. That would be one heck of a drought. Even in deserts, they get a certain amount of rainfall every year, and since there's you get all of the, what do you call that, water. Whoa, I didn't mean for that to happen. Anyway, here's a different design. There's no talk of an A-frame style design, but somebody came up with this idea. It is possible. Just because it doesn't say that you're supposed to do this does not mean that they didn't. But you would have to have a lot more structure on the interior to be able to come up with this particular look. I don't buy this one. All right, now this is the one. I'm going to put this on pause. All right, here we go. If you look to the very far back left, now that's supposed to represent badger skin. And they say that's on the very outermost. And then on the inside, that red one is supposed to be the red goats. Now, I still contend that the way Hebrew is written and spoken, that this covering, even though it says this and that, in Hebrew, this and that is the same as in English, this is that. So it's quite possible that the red ram skins and the badger skins were put together. But it's also possible that they were separate like this. There's just no reason to say that it had to be one or the other. You can go either way on that. So they're showing that the far back one is your badger skin, and then the one below it is your red ram, and then the one below that is your goat. And, you know, even white goats have brown spots and sometimes black spots. It would not be pure white unless they cut out all the spots. And man, you talk about what a ordeal that would be. So, and then if you're using the goat's fur instead of its skin, how you're gonna have to dye it white, bleach it or whatever you do. I don't know about things like that. And so then, as you're coming forward, the one with all the color, that's the one that's the very first curtain that has the header beam on it. So that's, you know, they're just showing the different layers. And they're showing that the lower layers just laying down like that. Now, again, as I said, if that goat part of it is actual skins, these people are going to die of heat stroke. If, on the other hand, the goat part is made from the goat's hair, as most people believe it is, or was, then you could get some air pass through. But I still think that it was probably skins, since it just says goats. It doesn't say either way. And I believe that would be pulled out during the summer and dropped down the way you're looking at it during the winter. Let's see if there's anything else I want to say about these. All right. So here you're seeing the inner part. See how they put the boards together on that far back wall? Everything's all put together. Okay. I've built a lot of things in my lifetime, and I can tell you that unless they put dowels between those boards, there's no way they're going to get them to stand up straight like that. You know, the longer they are in the weather and that sort of thing, the longer you have them, the more each one of them are going to warp. In this picture, the post in the front was warped, and I think that's just the picture. I don't think they intended for that to look that way. But I'm talking about that back wall. Those things would have warped. You would have had You would have seen light coming through them and stuff like that. So I don't buy that this is the way this was built, because I think it would have been spoken of differently. I think I've got a picture of the one that I think is a better representation here. Now notice that all of these are columns. You know, the boards, the word for boards is the same word for columns. So as you can see it now, there's columns, and now you can see the cherubim between the boards. So now what you have is what I'm contending is more likely. You have the bug screen, if you will, but it's the pretty. You can see it from the interior, and see how nice that looks. And then it'll be on the very top of the building, and you'll be able to see it through the walls. The wind will blow right through it, and it'll be nice and comfortable in there in the summertime. And then, of course, they've got the different layers of the skins on top. I believe this is more likely the way it would have looked. In fact, I'm positive of it. Wouldn't that have been pretty? Look at that. Oops. Oh. Now, this is something that I think is really interesting. This is a real building. This is a real temple. It is the most holy place in Mecca. This is where everybody goes to worship who are they? The Muslims. I just went blank. I don't know what they. But this is the curtain over this building, by the way, is almost the same exact dimensions as the temple. No, the temple, not the tabernacle. And they've covered it with these curtains. So this is they're lowering the curtain. It's coming down further, but you can still see the building underneath it. And these are real pictures with real people in them. These are not photoshopped or something. And there you can see it with the curtain all the way down. I contend that, why do I always think of Buddha? What was the guy's name? No, that's the God guy. Muhammad. I contend that Muhammad was a Jew, and that he tried to present himself as the Jewish Messiah. And when the Jews rejected him as Messiah, he got mad and decided to go with the Arab crowd and wound up making the Jews his enemies, which is not the way we think of it today. They weren't warring and wanting them killed and off the face of the planet and stuff back then. In fact, Jews were always friendly with the Muslims right up until the Ottoman Empire. It took a long time. It was the Western influence that caused it to go so far south. But I just thought it was interesting that they got this square building and with the curtains that hang down. Now, they built a solid building like the temple it was in Jerusalem, but then they put the curtain over the top of it, which is something the Jews didn't do. But it's like mixing the tabernacle and the temple together. So I think that's kind of good. All right, let's go back to the other shot. Need to move on, I guess. Okay, so we'll go on to verse 9. Literally in English, it would say, and join you 5 the curtains, 2 alone, and 6 the curtains, 2 alone, and W the curtain, the 6th, 2 front faces, the 10th. Okay, not as crazy as it sounds. Vehi barta, and join you. You will join, we would say. It's to bind together, hence to join together. How do you join curtains together? You sew them together. It's not rocket science. This is et, which is a pointer. Chamesh, that's 5. So you're going to join 5 ha-ge-riot, 5 curtains. Le-vad. So the 5 curtains will be joined together as a single unit. That's what they mean by 2 alone. It's this single, as a single piece. So it's going to be big and heavy. And this is ve'et, which is and, then it's pointing to something. Shesh, which is 6. Ha-ye-riot, that's 6 curtains. Levad, 2 alone. So you're going to take 5 of them and make them one thing, and then you can take 6 of them and make them one thing. So one's going to be wider than the other, that's for sure. They're all the same length, but one will be 5 curtains width wide, which remember they're all 4 each, and then the other will be 6 curtain widths wide. Then it says vechafalta, and you will double over. So remember I showed you on my little dealy whacker here, model, that you had the first one went over the top, and I think it was probably just even with the end, or it could have hung over a little bit. It wouldn't have mattered, but it didn't say to hang it over, so it didn't matter. But when you put the second one on, the goat hair skin, it had to have the foldy over part here. Remember, it's just a small amount, but it's half of that curtain, so that had to be folded over. That's what it's saying here. Vechafalta is to double it over, to fold it. I don't know, I guess I should have said fold instead of double. But literally it's double. To fold it in half so that you have, if you have something that's 4 wide, which you do in this case, you double it over, now you have 2 cubit wide pieces. That's all we're saying. This is it, which is pointing at something. Ha-ye-ria, the curtains. Ha-shishit, the 6th. So you double over the 6th curtain. This is El, which means 2. That's followed by Mul, so that's to the front. The one that you fold over will be at the front, not at the back. Then it says Panay, which we think of as faces. That's the front part. It's the Panay is the front part of you, the part that's turned towards someone, facing something. So that's why it's the front. Turn it toward the front, facing. You turn it toward the end, it's facing the front. This is Ha-Ohel, the front of the tent. So it's a pretty simple translation. And you should join 5 curtains separately and 6 curtains separately, and you shall fold over, which is the word for double, the 6th curtain at the entrance, the front of the face, the entrance of the tent. Of the words fold over, or double the 6th curtain, Rashi wrote that the curtain was folded over the entrance at the east side of the tabernacle like the veil of a bride. You saw it, right? I showed you this thing at scale, and you saw that the veil would have only been this high. You know what I'm saying? It's more like a cap, people. It's not like a veil. So you might have to disagree with me, man. I like the idea of it, but not really realistic once you see it in scale. Folded over the entrance at the east side, which is the front, like a bride. He also said it was to create an awning. Again, not much of an awning if you ask me. 2 cubits long. This is the length of your awning. Not much. Kasuto said, and the 6th curtain you shall double over at the front of the tent will be explained below, together with the other verses pertaining to the draping of the curtains over the boards. All right, let's hope he's right. Verse 10. I wouldn't have put it there if I didn't have his stuff, right? Verse 10. And do you 50 loops upon lip the curtain, the one, the edge her in junction, and 50 loops upon lip the curtain, the joining the second. All right. Just think of a tarp here. Think of 2 tarps, because it's kind of what they're doing here. The asita, and you will make, that's properly to labor, to work about, to do anything, to produce by manufacture, to fabricate, right? It's the same old word. Because we're in the process, if you will, of building the parts and pieces for the temple. So you're going to make this thing. Then we're going to get to Hamishim, 50. You're going to make 50 lulao, 50 loops. The things, the holes. Think of a tarp, the little roundy holes in the tarp, or the loops like in a shirt, right? That's a loop. It's not like a button hole.
Well, not nowadays.
Not nowadays. Interesting. So honestly, I don't know. I don't know if it's a loop like a belt loop, like my wife is saying that's a loop in our time, or is it just a hole like the holes in a call it? What I call it? Tarp, or a sewn up. I was picturing a sewn up like a button. So it's either that or it's like a belt loop. I don't know. It wouldn't really matter. Uh, just depends on the way they did it back then, and I don't honestly know. That's why you need an archaeologist, right? And then it says all, which is on or above or upon. Then it says sifat on the lip. So on the edge, like a tarp, it's going to be out there on that lip, the edge of the ria of the curtain. This is ha'echat, the one, so it's going to be this one as opposed to that one, right? Ha kizina on the edge, on her edge, so it's on the lip of her edge, which is kind of like saying the same thing twice if you think about it. Bahol baret, and that's in the junction. It's okay. You have this one, and it's here on the. This represents one curtain. This represents another curtain, right? And so on this edge, you're going to put your little loops. And then on this one, on this edge, you're going to put your little loops. And then that's at where they join together. That's at the union. Then it says, Bahamishim, 50. Lula, 50 loops. These loops, it says that they're called loops. They're called lulaot, so called from their being twisted round. Again, it can be either way. It can be holes, with the sewing around them, or it can be more like a loop that my wife's talking about, like a belt loop. It can go either way. And this is all on sifat, the lip. We have that word ha yet ria of the curtain. Ha hoderet, where they join together. Ha shenit, the second. So you say and do this to the one and to the other. So your translation, and you will make 50 loops on the edge of the outermost curtain, and 50 loops on the edge of the curtain that joins the other. I shouldn't say second, but the other. So where they join together. This outer edge, the loops are going to join them together. I wish I knew. Casuto said it is not stated of what kind of material these loops were to be made. So he obviously believes they're like belt loops. Which, I'm good with that. Casuto believed it, I do too. All right, number 11. Verse 11. And do you hooks brass 50 and brought or bring you the hooks and loops and joined you the tent and be one. So it's ba'asita, there's your word again, to labor, to work about, to make, to produce by labor, to manufacture, to fabricate. So you're going to make something. Karse, you're going to make hooks. Properly curved, joint, hook, into which a little hook is put. It doesn't really leave a lot of information here. Is it really a hook like we think of, where it's like a question mark? Or is it or a J, something like that? Or is it a ring? I mean, if you're going to hook these things together, the curtains, if they're going to be hooked together, and we're not talking about hanging the curtains, we're talking about joining the hooks together, right? So, would it make more sense if they were rings than hooks? Like a C? Or even a circle, something that will actually go all the way around and hold on to them more like a C, I would think. Either way. Now, remember, we don't know these things. There's none have been found, and probably never will, because they've no doubt been melted down and turned into 10 other things since then. So we don't have them. No one drew pictures that we know of. No one ever made a stone relief. I mean, some of this stuff could one day be found. But for right now, we don't know. We don't know what a hook looked like today. We do know that the Jews called the vav, the reason why you hear the word and in front of so many sentences is because they began to use the vav to represent the hook. Now, the vav does not look like a J. It looks more like a 7. With the top of it curving in an upward. Going more upward and then coming straight down. So that's more like a nail, isn't it? Right, a vav wouldn't hook anything, but that's what they represent as the hooks. And they're what hold the curtains up, and that's why when you look at a scroll that's written in Hebrew, they put the words where they're basically looking like curtains, and you have vavs at the top of this, the very top where it first starts writing, to hold the curtains up. Go look at buy one of the little $20 scrolls like what's behind me there. You can get those for $20. It may not be as nice as the one I have, but because I think that one may cost more. It's a little fancier than some, but you can get one like that where you can roll it out and you can look at it and see that the words are put in there like curtains. And if you look up at the top, you'll see there's a lot of vavs up there to hold the curtain in place. It's where the whole saying, starting a sentence with the word and came from. But going all the way back to here, the alphabet they had was very different. And the aleph looked, or the vav rather, the vav looked very different. Very different. So I don't think that thinking went back that far. So anyway, you had the hooks, not sure what they look like. But we do know now, shet, that they're made of brass. In other words, copper. Especially as hardened and tempered and like steel. Used for weapons and other cutting instruments. Anything made of brass, money, feather, or bond of brass. It's work of brass. I don't know what the difference between brass and copper is. So it says that it means brass, but then it calls it copper. I don't know. Chamishim, that's the word 50. We already had that. Vehe veta, and brought you will bring. It's really exactly what it means. You will bring. At pointing at something. Hakeh harasim, the hooks. I just don't know what to think of that. Balu laot, in loops, to which hooks were put in the curtains of the holy tabernacle, so called from their being twisted round. It really kind of sounds more like a belt loop, doesn't it? Oh, see if I can show that like I was showing me. Saying you take this and it's all twisted around, right? And if you pull it around like this, it makes a loop. Yeah, that's what she's saying. You have to have a C type deal to hook two loops together. Anyway, that's likely to be exactly what they're talking about when they say loop. Anyway, and Kasuto also thought that, so let's go with that. This is Dechibarta, and join you. You will join together. You're going to join together at what? Ha'ohel. You're going to join the tent together with this. You're going to join this whole thing together, and it's going to begin to really make the tent, right? Vehaya, and it will be echad. It will be one. So your translation is, and you will make 50 brass hooks, and you will bring the hooks into the loops and join them, and the tent will be one. Even Ezra wrote that items were made of gold because they would be seen, but that items made of brass because they would not be seen. It sounds reasonable, except there's some problems with that. They said to cover the whole board with gold, did they not? And is every single thing that we see of the temple shows that the gold is covered, right? It'd be almost covered on the inside. If you hang those cherubim on the inside, let's say they put them all together, you hang it on the inside, you're not even going to see the gold walls. So not so much, because it just doesn't pan out. The more you look around, the more stuff in gold that you would see is covered. The little ringlets that hold the stabs that they turned into poles that go down the sides of it, which we haven't talked about, those are all gold and will not be seen, and stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff that's gold that gets covered up, so it doesn't hold water. In his commentary on the book of Exodus, Umberto Moshe David Casuto wrote, and I quote, "The Bible never intended to give us complete specifications," and added in verse 30, which also belongs to this paragraph, the reference to Moses' vision on Mount Sinai, in order to inform us that not all the details were given to Moses verbally, and that what was left unexplained in words was clarified by the vision that he saw. Casuto then gives his version of the tabernacle, and I quote, "The boards, as will be shown in the next paragraph, form 3 walls 10 cubits high. The southern and northern walls were each 30 cubits long, whilst the length of the western wall at the rear of the tabernacle was 10 cubits, corresponding to the width of the sanctuary. The eastern flank, which also measured 10 cubits, was left open. The curtain of the tabernacle were placed lengthwise over the tops of the boards, commencing from the east side and passed across the width of the shrine, so as to form in the middle a roof over the interior of the sanctuary. And the excess in the length remained hanging at both ends on the inside, or outside rather. Since the width of the tabernacle was 10 cubits, and the length of the curtains was 28 cubits, 9 cubits were left hanging over the boards on each side. Apparently the extremities of the curtains hanging down were fastened at each end by clasps or loops at their edges to pegs, resembling nails," which is the bob of the 2,000 years ago, and not the bob of 5,000 or 3,500. I guess this is 3,500. Anyway, there's nails affixed to the boards. These are the pegs of the tabernacle referred to subsequently in 27:19 and elsewhere. At this point, Casuto pointed out that the Kaaba at the Arba shrine in Mecca is covered by a veil in this manner. And that's that one I showed you with the black veil. That's why I went and got the picture. Of the boards on both sides, which were covered on the outside by the curtains of the tabernacle, the nethermost cubit still remained bare, since the boards were 10 cubits high, whilst the overhang portion of the curtains on each side was only 9 cubits long. The boards at the back of the sanctuary on the west side were completely covered, for the length of the shrine was 30 cubits, whereas the two set of the tabernacle curtains were together 40 cubits long. It follows that at the rear of the sanctuary there were left over 10 cubits of the curtains, which covered the boards at the back from top to bottom. On the curtains of the tabernacle lay the goat's hair curtains of the tent, covering them on top and on all 3 sides. No difficulty is presented by the fact that their beauty remained concealed, for this covering was only on the outside, whereas in the interior the curtains, which their designs of cherubim figures, were visible on the ceiling of the sanctuary. Anyone inside the tabernacle looking upward would see the cherubim, which symbolized the celestial throne of God, and he would also see the gold clasp in which 2 there was an allusion to the heavens, as the sages of the Talmud already realized in Baritha on the erection of the tabernacle, chapter 2, in parallel passages, and the clasp appeared in the tabernacle like stars in the sky. Okay. The excess in the case of the tent curtains was greater than that of the tabernacle curtains. Since the former were longer and their number was greater, this surplus was spread over the four sides of the tabernacle. To the part left over on the eastern side, that is, on the side of the entrance of the sanctuary, appertains the statement in verse 9, and you shall double over the sixth curtain at the front of the tent. Apparently, the larger set of the tent curtains, comprising 6 curtains, was placed on the east side, and the smaller set, consisting of the 5 curtains, was put on the west side. Hence, the curtain that is reckoned as the 6th, if one begins to count from where the 2 sets are joined together by the clasp, is the first on the eastern side, the one nearest to the entrance, at the point where it actually reached the entrance at the forefront of the tent. It was doubled, that is, it was folded in the middle along its whole length, so that 2 cubits of its breadth were laid above the first curtain of the tabernacle, and the 2 remaining cubits, to wit, the outermost, were folded back and placed beneath the same tabernacle curtain in order to cover its edge well and to give it thorough protection. Thus, the clasps of the tent were not lying exactly over the tabernacle clasps. Such an arrangement was liable to give trouble, but were located 2 cubits further toward the west. Now the excess of the tent curtains on the western side was 12 cubits long, for the length of the 2 sets together came to 44 cubits. There were 11 curtains of 4 cubits each, and if we deduct the 2 folded cubits and the 30 cubits represented the length of the sanctuary, 12 cubits were left over at the back of the shrine. 10 of these covered the boards at the rear of the sanctuary down to the ground, thus there still remained 2 cubits. Obviously, the last 2 cubits are there to cover the bases. As mind-boggling as that is, I must say I will have to agree disagreeably. And we'll get into that in the coming weeks. That's as far as I can get us today, but I hope you enjoyed it, understood at least a little of it. We'll show more pictures and more, I don't know, what's that thing called that I made? Models in the coming weeks. And hopefully that helps. Shalom, shalom.